All right, click the links. Join my channel here or over at Subscribestar. So, Black Aragon from Magic the Gathering, which Magic the Gathering had their own reputation for being creeps. Triggers the Chad Hugo boss, and if you're not a globalist, according to little brainwashed globalist kids, then you're fash. It's the 4-panel meme of political affiliation, left, right, libertarian, or not. And where it's this tiny little upper left-hand authoritarian leftist corner of their globalists, and anything outside that little globalist box is going to be Hugo Boss wearing fash with, what do they use, Mausers and Lugers or something? That's their worldview. It's like, do you think you might have been brainwashed by your globalist propaganda from government schools and the mainstream media that's been pumping into your silly little brains 24/7? No, it's totally organic. Give me my estrogen. I don't think this is organic. Anyway, so Black Aragon. And if you disagree with Black Aragon, somebody said on Twitter, who's this ninja with Aragon's sword? Because it's not Aragon. Aragon has gray eyes and fair skin. And he's from the Numenors, a race of people with fair skin. This is not Tolkien's Aragorn. So this is, you're disrespecting the original artistic vision. And you're also saying that you know better than the artist, the genius, the god of the story who breathed life into the story. You don't. It'd be like if I tried to play, I don't know, Sweet Child of Mine or something, but I don't know how to play guitar. It's like it's just an insult to the music to try to do that. But they do it anyway because they have. I mean, this is the participation trophy generation where everything they do is stunning and brave as long as it goes in the direction of globalism, which is basically anti-nation, anti-Christian, anti-white, anything anti-European, anything they can destroy and deconstruct, like European in-group preferences or structure and nationalism, anything like that. Like they're all on board with it because these are the worst people on earth. So yes, you should hate this, and you should hate these people, either at Newsweek or people at Magic the Gathering, because they're mostly obese soy boys and cat ladies. I mean, people who are very, very angry. They're very, very angry at the world. So literally, you're literally the Australian corporal if you're not a globalist. Does it make sense? None of this has to make sense. Aragon is not a sub-Saharan black African. If you want one, you simply have to write a new book. Surely it can't be that hard. Take the Englishman's story and basically admit that you can't write your own story or even create something new inspired by the fantasy of European mythology. It's much easier to steal the story and pander to a fan base that is not. That's not what they are on board with Lord of the Rings from the start. Lord of the Rings was always a European analogous story, a European mythology set with European people. It's like it was an overlay of Europe. That's for 80 years. That's what people were on board with the story from all different cultures. They took the story as it was. It didn't have to represent all people because it's not all things to all people. A European wrote it for European people, or I mean maybe for the world, but it was in a European setting. Clearly, it's even as they're described in the book with light eyes and fair skin and all this kind of stuff. But it's like clearly the overlay is Europe. You can in your mind's eye kind of see people, Mediterranean people, maybe Western Russia. Maybe the elves would be like the Scandinavian people because they're more blonde or something and they're snowy. I don't know. I just kind of remember that the image of the guy walking on the snow. The thing is, it's like it's clearly an overlay for Europe, and that's what people enjoyed because the story felt authentic and organic. It just like stealing the story is an L, and it's kind of weird that they don't see it as an L because it's saying like, are you not able to write your own story? And I don't know, like anyone could write their own story. Any kind of, if you want to have like a mythology story for a board game type of setting, why don't you just write something fresh and put the characters you want in it? It's like, well, because evil can't create. They can just steal a story and then try to pander to this audience that's like less than 1% of the audience that wants this because they're NPCs. And the funny thing is, Tolkien also had that line about I don't know, the shadow creatures can't create anything. Anyway, I mean, what does it say that like by pandering to people, it's embarrassing, and it's weird that more people don't see how embarrassing this is. The best you can do is take something this artistic genius created, Tolkien, and remove the European aspect of the story and swap it out with a non-European. Why wouldn't you just respect the artist's original vision? Not all things have to be for all people. What that is you end up with is rice. It's like the base of a meal is rice. But it's like that's the only thing that doesn't offend anyone. If you once you start adding in vegetables and spices and different meats, it's like, well, some cultures can have some things and some cultures can't have other things. It's like, that's why you don't try to make everything for all people, because you're losing out on reaching the pinnacle of greatness. You're never going to have greatness if it's this kind of the equivalent of fictional rice story that appeals. It's like male or female hero goes on hero's quest, and you just make everything mash up with some politically correct versions. Like they're rewriting kids' fictional stories instead of like maintaining the artist's original vision. I mean, it's like it's 1984. Whenever you bring up 1984 to them, they get triggered by that. But it really is. Anyway, so Magic the Gathering, from what I gather, is a collection of soy boys who hate themselves and the world. I suspect they're picked last for sports. They pay for sex, that kind of thing. So their revenge is to destroy. And the thing is, when you look behind the scenes of these people, they look like what you'd expect them to look like. So their revenge is to destroy European characters, and then they own the chads on social media. Then they call them all istophobic, and they virtue signal about how much better Black Aragorn is, except he's not black. He's not a black African. The story is set within European mythology. The story was a love letter to the people of Europa. An Englishman creates this piece of magic, and the best the modern parasites can do is to replace the European characters from the story that they created. It's embarrassing for them, and it's weird that they don't see this as a loss and as such obvious pandering. You want non-European characters, fine, just create new ones. Set them in a tribe. If we want them black, set them in a tribe of all people who look like them, so it makes sense. And it's like they did the same thing with Rings of Power. You have all these mixed groups of people, and you look at them like they don't belong together because they don't have the same physical morphology. They didn't evolve in the same evolutionary environment to have the same adaptations to their environment. Why are they together? Like, you know this subconsciously. You're not standing up and talking to your wife and articulating this, but you're saying it doesn't make sense. They don't look like they belong together. Why are they together? And like the people who make Rings of Power, this kind of stuff, they don't have an answer, so they just call like racist says what. Like I don't believe in that concept. That's just the term that these globalists are using to control you, and these people just parrot this information. They never stop. It's just stimulus response. They never stop to think about the things they're saying, or you ask them to define it. And I just was scrolling Twitter this morning. People asking them to define that term, and they couldn't. It was a circular definition because it had to mean whatever they wanted it to mean at that moment. Anyway, so Aragorn, he's from the people in Numenor. They're all one people, gray eyes and fair skin. All the members of the tribe have fair skin because they're the equivalent of, the Italians for the story. The story is already complete. It is the Alpha and Omega because the god of the story has passed on in 1973. The story doesn't make sense with a black Aragorn because it means that the rest of his tribe also has to look like him. They have to be the same color. And that changes everything. How hard is it? And the thing is, you're from roughly the same environment, but you have the skin adaptation to extreme solar conditions. But others who are right next door to you don't have that adaptation. Yeah, that's right. So explain that. We're not going to explain it, and you're still Hugo Boss, Roman saluting with a Luger. Like, because you want an accurate story and you want verisimilitude and nothing violates the willing suspension of disbelief. That's in your worldview, and anything that disagrees with you is Hugo Boss. Yeah, literally in that worldview, that's how myopic they are. Apparently, it's impossible for soy boys to create a new IP. If they want Afro Hobbits and Afro Elves, just create a new universe. Give me a briefcase of money, and I will create a new fantasy setting for you for a very reasonable amount of money. Anyway, the idiots on Twitter keep saying skin color, and I keep pointing out it's more than skin color. The association that the reader has with the original story, it's the association with the original. Great, now you add in race mixing and probably species mixing too, because I think one's human and one's an elf. it's more than skin color. It's these deep associations with European characters in the Englishman's story. It's a connection that has been around for a long time. People love the original story. All different peoples love the original story. You take something, it's like the Shaka Zulu story, which is kind of weird that they never tried to tell that story. And then you swap out the characters, like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The story is already alpha and omega. It's already been completed. It's been around for 80 years, and they decide to break those connections between the artists, the mind of the artist, the vision of the artists, and the continuity of the story of being this European mythology and these characters that you were familiar with, and at the last minute after 80 years they go, no, we're going to swap out a black African for a European character. It's like, well, you change everything up. You must be Istophobic. That word doesn't mean anything. I just gave you valid reasons why this is breaking these connections between story and setting and reader and mythos and headcanon, and you're just calling people Istophobic. That's not a response. It's not a counter argument. It's at this point, it's the equivalent of an ad hominem, because you're not addressing anything that's probative or relevant to the heart of the argument, because they can't, because they don't have a good reason for doing this other than we're going to make the Chad Hugo boss outraged. Probably not, because I'm sure they're just not going to be taking part in this kind of thing. Anyway, so if you substitute non-Europeans from the story, it's like this guy who played Aragorn in the movie. Perfect adaptation. The movie did a really solid job. Tolkien was a genius who breathed life into the story. Anything you do to change that, it's going to be an act of destruction. The Soy Boys at Magic the Gathering are not genius. If they were, they'd just create their own stories, but they can't, because they're Soy Boys. They sit around the computer and they just coming up with things that are transformative and not curative. And people are tired of this transformative cultural Bolshevism. The reason you like Lord of the Rings is because you like the original Lord of the Rings story. If you remove the Europeans from the European mythology, it falls apart. As you see with everything that's come out in the past, 20 years where they've been doing this. It's representation, but it's a European story. Why don't you just create something fresh? They can't. They really can't create anything new that connects with a wider audience. That has a core, because stories are inherently nationalist, tribalist. Stories are very based. They're very right wing. In the same, if you want to consider tribalism right wing and globalism the opposite of tribalism. And globalism doesn't work. It's like young kids today trying to push communism, and anyone who's over 40 or 50 who's lived through it or the fall of it looks around and goes, yeah, it's been done. And like the things you're saying now, people were saying 40 years ago, like, oh, it wasn't real communism. Yeah, they've been saying that for 50 years. And the kids today were like, no, I read my Marx and Engels, and the communist dialectic predicts it'll work. Yeah, they've been saying that for the past 70 years. It doesn't, just result in starvation, because, well, if we were in charge, yeah, again, they said that, like, we're just repeating history. It's been done. Like, sometimes it's as good as it gets, or at least, like, you try something new. It's like to try the same old thing that's been tried in a dozen countries and has resulted in misery. It's like, no, it'll work if we're in charge. And you look at the people who say this, and you look at them, it's like, how's your personal life? I read your profile. It says you're suicidally depressed, and you're on pharmaceuticals, and you're self-harming, and you're like, you hate yourself, you hate the world, but your theory of government will work if only you're in charge. It's like, so do you run small businesses? Do you run a big family? What do you do? And you look at them, it's like nothing. They read a few books on this kind of nonsense, and they think their worldview is like, so how are you gonna fix what was happening in the past? Well, I wasn't in charge back then, and you get the idea. These people are really hard to take. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys on the next episode.